Okay, so this week, Microsoft announced that, Xbox Game Pass streaming is available now for Amazon Fire Stick 4K and 4K Max, the latest models. I downloaded the app onto my Fire Stick. I've given it a go. But and I'll have some impressions on that shortly. But also comes with an advertising campaign, which is essentially saying, literally, that you don't need an Xbox to play Xbox, which is, I think that's fairly controversial messaging. To the point, obviously, gets the point across. But I'm curious what you think this means strategically about where Microsoft is going. Let's start with Oliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty inevitable in terms of Microsoft's overall trajectory that they would start pitching the idea that you don't really need an Xbox to play Xbox, and they would start pitching that Xbox experience a little bit less and the Game Pass more front and center. But I think like that only goes so far as the actual quality of the experience. And I think like the actual experience using Xbox game streaming has not been very good at all. And I think it's optimistic to say that if you don't have an Xbox, don't worry, because the actual quality of the game streaming on a phone or a tablet or a computer without that Xbox hardware or a Fire Stick, I'm sure, is not so good. It's not very much like playing a current gen console, even on the Series
Right.
S hardware in which it's derived, obviously. On a phone or a tablet, the concessions aren't quite so bad, but especially on a television, I just don't really see it. So personally, if I'm in a situation like that, I would never want to play Xbox without an Xbox. I'd rather grab a Switch or just play on my phone, maybe play a one-tap phone game or something simple like that. I really would not want to play an Xbox without an Xbox, but I think that ultimately, if they do want to go with this marketing, that it needs to be backed up by a superior service, if not like a good service, if not like the best in the business, rather, then at least a good quality service that's at least, up there with Sony, I guess would be the bare minimum, but even that isn't probably good enough.
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, for me, I think when I see that advertisement and also the discussion around it, it does point to the fact that for me, it's not a fact then in that place, that Microsoft's slowly exiting the traditional console market. That's the way it feels, because, I don't consume console games, but I am aware of like advertising around console games. You see them all throughout, like here in Berlin, and there's just like no presence mind share for Microsoft's Xbox here. And I think switching to this, like, we focus on streaming model and then we also highlight it as part of it that you don't need a box. I mean, I don't know if it's the good long-term strategy at the moment, given the lack of mind share that I see from my end. I don't think it's going to offer necessarily a super compelling experience for most people that are really interested in it, based upon what I've seen and played and the coverage that we've done. I don't think it is actually a good, like Oliver said, replacement for the box, because it isn't offering like any of the image quality or performance or, well, really any of that, or the latency as well too. I think it needs to be in a much better position to actually start being a great advertising point. If it had the quality of something like Nvidia's a game streaming service, then I could totally say, oh yeah, this makes sense. But right now, in the current place where it's at, and also the current Xbox market position, it seems like they're talking about it in this intense way too early as a replacement for the box.
Yeah. Where do we begin with this? I mean, I did buy a Fire Stick to test this out. I've been eagerly awaiting it, and it is essentially, it's Xbox game streaming. There's nothing special about it, which means I think Oliver hit the nail on the head there, essentially, which is to say that it has latency problems, in that it's noticeable. I don't think it's game-changingly awful or anything. It's okay.
Right.
It works. And I think if we go back to Tom's PlayStation versus Xbox streaming piece, the Xbox latency was better, but the image quality was worse. The Fire Stick thing, it sets up very, very easily. You pair your controller very, very easily. The interface looks very much like the website, or more specifically, the Samsung app that they did, which doesn't really have any, obviously not surprising there. It is Xbox Series S games that you're streaming from the cloud, which again, Tom established back in the day. It is a 1080p stream. It's also a low bitrate, low quality 1080p stream. So yeah, as Oliver said, works fine on a tablet or a phone. In actual fact, I think the phone app gets a 720p stream, but even so, I think that's kind of okay for a mobile device. But I tested it on my desktop 48-inch OLED, and it's really not great. And I think the missing part of the puzzle for Microsoft in aggressively pursuing streaming is you've got to make the quality of the experience compelling. Now, there's only so much that can be done with latency, right? Owing to things like infrastructure and the laws of physics. But image quality, why not increase the bitrate for TVs? It knows exactly what client it's streaming to. It probably even has some idea of how big the screen is. But, TVs, it just highlights the quality of the stream being substandard pretty badly, to the point where, for example, in the background on the Starfield menu screen, you can see artifacts just on the gradient, the color gradients in the background. It's a traditionally poor thing that streaming isn't particularly great at handling, but it's there. Some games look all right. I mean, I tried Forza Horizon 5. It was okay, actually. Starfield did tend to break up a bit. I mean, it's all going to depend on the quality of the content going through what is effectively a one-size-fits-all encoder. And I just don't think the bitrate's there for a TV. It's that simple. And to put that forward as kind of like an acceptable way to play Xbox games, I'm not convinced. I would easily, put this side by side with a Series S, and, Series S is a cheap machine. You can pick it up, for virtually nothing secondhand. Please, if you're going to play Xbox, play it on the Series S. It's so much better. It's really sort of a bit disheartening.
Rich, I have a question for you regarding the Fire Stick. So for me, when I plug something into the USB of my television, it doesn't necessarily go into game mode. So there's going to be like extra input latency and all these other considerations.
Yeah. In fairness, the Xbox app tells you to switch mode. To game mode. It does highlight this, and I think that's a good thing, because I think on my LG, as standard, you plug in the Fire Stick and it kind of went into filmmaker mode,
right?
Which is probably best for the majority of content on that you stream through a Fire Stick, right? But it's certainly not good enough for gaming. So to its credit, it did highlight that and said, "Whoa, hold on a minute! Make sure you're in the right mode for the best response." But even then, it's still using Wi-Fi, which it kind of has to really, which means that there's added latency on top of that. So, I think Tom did his latency tests through Ethernet just to kind of remove the variance of anybody's given Wi-Fi setup. But obviously, if you're using Wi-Fi instead of a cable, the latency will increase. It was okay. The gameplay experience was okay with a controller. But the image quality was just really, really poor, to the point where you look at it and it's, it's not good enough. It kind of does look like a playable YouTube stream.
Yeah.
It's just really sort of, I think if you're going to do a major product rollout, like the Samsung app, like the Fire Stick, and say to people, this is a great alternative way, or a way to play Xbox, you've got to deliver it with the quality of the experience, and it's kind of not there, which is, baffling to me.
Yeah. I think actually Microsoft might be in a good position to deliver something really special here, because obviously they have their machine learning technologies, including AutoSR, right?
Right.
It's very interesting, already runs on an NPU. Well, yeah, I would add latency is a concern, but throw latency out the window for a second. Presume that maybe they build data centers super close to people, and latency is less of a concern. You could imagine like maybe a frame extrapolation or maybe interpolation technique to handle drop frames. Maybe, who knows? Probably it wouldn't work very well, but it could be okay for something like a phone, right, where you're dealing with a network connectivity problems on a more consistent basis. They could have some kind of AI upscaling model like AutoSR to improve image quality running on an NPU. As long as they can get that frame time down within a frame, it could be okay. You could use local NPUs in the phones, and now in Windows, you have lots of devices with NPUs in them. I think a sufficiently robust game streaming service could be really good, but I think beyond that home experience, it actually has to be pretty good on like a 4G connection as well. It has to be something that people want to use out and about in the go, because otherwise it seems like something that the appeal is a lot more limited, right? In these like Fire Stick TV type environments where you're already dealing with, an environment that could accommodate a console.
Right.
So I would suggest that like if Microsoft was investing into that could be a really interesting service. But at the moment, it's just like an also ran, not very good game streaming option that is like not as good as GeForce Now, which is, I think, to NVIDIA probably not as big of a deal as Xbox game streaming is to Microsoft, but I could be wrong.
No, I
don't know. I don't really know. We've got no numbers really. We don't really know how prevalent streaming is on Game Pass. And we've got no numbers at all from NVIDIA on how well GeForce Now is doing. What we do know about GeForce Now is that, to their credit, NVIDIA has continued to iterate, improve the data centers with every generation. They've basically done everything they can from a technical perspective to address the issues that we're seeing on other streaming services. They've pretty much licked latency, for example, which is a pretty phenomenal achievement. They can get better than local latency compared to a console on the same game, which is astonishing. They've got 4K 120.
They've got VRR.
They've got G-Sync. Yeah, they've got variable refresh rate on a streaming service. These are the kind of things that if it was a sort of low volume service that wasn't really of that importance to them, they probably wouldn't have done it, but they've done it regardless, and all credit to them. So yeah, I mean, I don't think the streaming situation is kind of hopeless. NVIDIA proves it can be done. In terms of the application of streaming, the mobile situation is interesting because, how do I put it? If you're on the go, you're kind of moving between different cell areas, right? Particularly if you're moving at speed, like on a train or something. And I'm not sure that the consistency is there to guarantee a good experience. It's all going to depend on infrastructure, right? But on a more general sort of strategic level, I'm kind of thinking that going back to this whole concept of, you don't need an Xbox to play an Xbox. I think looking to the future, Microsoft is taking a look at, what the new generation of gamers are doing. And, fundamentally, teenagers are sort of on their phones primarily. And, the guys and girls who are really into games move on to PC. And so they're probably looking to a future where the console is less relevant and where they can tap into where the users are actually going. And if it's phones and PCs, well, they're kind of going to get there eventually, right, with this strategy, and possibly get there in a way that, Nintendo and Sony won't. So I think the strategy is probably makes a lot more sense if you're looking at things globally across 5 to 10 years,
right?
Possibly less so right now, because, if you're sending out a message that you don't need to buy a console, well, that kind of looks almost suicidal from a business perspective, right? Because one thing I do think is that Game Pass does need a home platform to sit on, to live on, and to sell from, and that is a console right now. And yeah, I think the transition to the next generation is going to be quite interesting, because I do think all the signs are pointing towards Microsoft basically moving towards a Surface type model where the console is like a PC and it's like a custom design and other people can create their own PCs/Xboxes. I think that's it. It's just we're in this awkward transition period right now. And it doesn't look great when you're basically trying to rewrite the rule book on what a gaming platform actually is. Mm-hmm. Oliver, any final thoughts?
No, in general, I'm just not that happy with the overall quality of game streaming services. And personally, I'm a big advocate of using your own hardware. I love having my own console and PC hardware, and I think that's going to provide the best experience in virtually any case if you have decent hardware. But I'm kind of resigned to the probability that game streaming is going to become a lot more common. I just think that the quality needs to improve quite a bit before it's even a comparable experience to other alternatives for mobile gaming like a Switch. I think it's just not nearly good enough. Maybe some of those issues are unresolvable. Like, I don't think the network issues can truly ever be resolved, but maybe with enough accommodation on the device end, you could actually make that okay in somewhat unstable circumstances, but it'll never be ideal, right?
I did like your idea of local device extrapolation or generation of frames for drop frames. Like, there's nothing like this. Kind of harkens back to what Rich, when we talked with AMD about FSR3 back in Gamescom of last year. Maybe it was the year before. My brain's
it was last year.
It was last year. My brain's fried. This Corona just messed me up so bad with regards to time. But getting back into it, just basically the idea that your game runs to whatever refresh rate your TV or local device runs at, and any real performance issues are ironed out via frame generation. And I actually thought that idea was very compelling, especially for ultra high refresh rate monitors and things like that are going to be coming in time. But actually for the low end streaming side of things, or you already see this in, for example, VR devices targeted toward mobile, then using extrapolation, async time warp, interpolation for frames that are dropped actually makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like that might be the bridging gap that Oliver was talking about to get that local, already compromised experience to at least be somewhat better, because you just can't get around all the infrastructural bandwidth problems in the short term, at least in the physics problems. So I find that idea very interesting. But Microsoft, unfortunately, my nth degree take on this right now is that there's just not a wholehearted effort there from the quality perspective. And I kind of see this across the entire Microsoft portfolio, where I just like think about that Xbox app on PC, or I think about the Microsoft Store on PC, just like things that are just kind of like not really completely thought out.
There's a lot of work to do, isn't there?
That's the point. Yeah.
I mean,
it's like, yeah. Yeah, it's just like a lot of things. They say they start doing some work on something, and then it's kind of like just semi-abandoned, and then just keep pushing. They keep pushing, more content on something that's not a great basis already. And, this streaming feels a little bit like that in its current iteration.
I noticed you did a tweet, Alex, about how poor the Windows Store still is. And we've talked about this ad nauseum on the F-Direct Weekly. However, it's just fascinating to actually just click on the replies and see everybody's war stories. Their battles with the Windows Store app. Yeah. It's awful. Sort it out. How difficult is it to launch a game from an app? Answer, well, everybody else manages to do it. I still can't play Tomb Raider Definitive Edition on my PC.
Reason unknown.
Reason unknown. And of course, you had your Hellblade 2 scenario where you couldn't launch it.
Still can't. Still doesn't launch. It's all
works fine on Steam. This is crazy. Anyway, quick supporter question here from Robert F. Greetings, gentlemen. Microsoft has told us we don't need an Xbox to play on Xbox. Do you think this business approach, and in light of the Series S significantly outselling Series X, affects Microsoft's next generation of consoles? Why is it necessary to win top of the flops? I love that.
I like that.
Quote unquote, top of the flops. With expensive subsidized hardware, when the majority of Xbox consumers opted for the Series S this generation, surely a cheaper hybrid offering in line with current messaging makes more sense. What would such a machine look like? I think it's the handheld, right? They're talking about a handheld. There's no reason why your handheld can't connect to a TV screen and look okay. And in actual fact, I mean, we talked about Auto SR last week, and base 720p can look reasonable upscaled via Auto SR to a 4K screen. So I reckon that's probably part of the puzzle, possibly. Top of the flops, it's an interesting one, but I think it's all about scalability. Microsoft want to keep up with trends of PC gaming, and the PC gamer does demand a certain degree of fidelity at the top end. And I honestly think, it probably serves both markets to have like a lower end hybrid console that's a handheld, and you've got your big big box that is indeed top of the flops.
I'd like to see an approach from Microsoft, kind of like you suggested, where you have this low-end device, this handheld, and if that is going to be as central to Microsoft strategy as I think we assume based off of Phil Spencer's constant hints and suggestions, then that would certainly represent a good floor for the device. And then from there, you can scale up, and hopefully there would be a medium tier console like a Series S perhaps, then a Series X like console that is more all out, or even beyond that, right? Really having the top of the roost, kind of like they had with the One X, where it was just confidently ahead of anything else in the market, even, into the PlayStation 4 Pro and well into, into the current generation. It was still, a powerful machine. So I'd hope that they would have a bit of differentiation and they wouldn't just say we're going to have the lowest common denominator. But I think based on their messaging, like I think Sarah Bond was talking about having the most powerful hardware leap you've ever seen in Xbox. I think that was the quote, right? That would certainly suggest a device that is not just aiming at the low end of the market for what they're trying to do in home consoles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Xbox One X, I don't think it was a massive sales success across the, in view of the entire generation. But what it did do was it continually sent the message that the best place to play these multi-platform games was on Xbox. And I think that's a really powerful message that you shouldn't let go of. And I think, what can I say? I think it's probably the right strategy. Question is it actually going to be a device that's sold in any big volume, or is it going to be more of a Surface style device with more emphasis placed on, we've got all of our games on PC, build your own hardware or get your own pre-built, what do you think, Alex?
Oh my gosh. With regards to talking about their strategy. Gosh. Yeah, with their strategy, to me, it's hard to parse because they're at such a crossroads right now. I know what I would prefer because I play PC games. Like, I do like the idea of this top end box that Oliver mentioned. I also think the idea of a handheld bridges the Steam Deck market and this, as well as the Switch market, which is something that both Microsoft and Sony don't really have purview to. Like, they just don't have access to these. We make wonderful, low cost games that children really love, and also people of all ages really love. I think, it's not just the hardware that's going to have to sell it if you're trying to enter that Switch-like market. It's also like the people love the Switch software, and you have to offer that on the device. On the PC side of things, you kind of get that with the indie AA space. Consoles, there's just maybe smaller of a market there, or it's not so well known. It's really hard to guess at that there. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's probably what they're going to do, but I am right now still extremely unsure of how successful that can be, given how much the Xbox brand has suffered in image.
Well, I'll tell you what, Alex. I mean, you may have to buy one of these new Xboxes in order to guarantee that you can actually launch a game.
Yeah, this is true. I need the hardware first before I access the store. This is so true.
Please sort out this store. What's going on? It's going on for years now. How difficult is it to do a launcher? My God! And
it's awful.
they want to obviously sell Game Pass subscriptions. It really would help if it was, functionally working.
Yeah,